Hello everybody and welcome to the DungeonDodge pet tier list. Before we begin, I would like to say that I recently hit level 100, so I feel that I'm qualified to speak on this topic. And I've also gotten help from many max level players that have been playing for a very long time. If you'd like to see the list of all the different pets and how to obtain them, there will be a link in the description. Finally, pets that are placed within the same tier are not ranked separately, so if one pet is higher than another pet in the same tier, don't pay too much attention to it. Alright, let's get into it. Starting off F tier, we have the spider pet. Now, the spider pet poison is just a strictly worse version of the tarantula pets. It's horrible. You have a 7.5% chance to just poison your enemies when you attack, dealing extra damage over time. You gain 60 speed, and you have a 1.5% chance to dodge any enemy's attack, completely nullifying it. Next is the skeleton pet. The skeleton is most likely going to be your very first archer pet, and it's not a bad one at that. It's a pretty good beginner pet for the class. You get a 30% range damage buff, which is pretty nice. You take 75% less damage from skeletons, and every mob gains a 7.5% chance to drop an arrow. The last perk is not very useful, but the first one makes it a really good starting archer pet. At the end of F tier is the Gilded Golem. The Gilded Golem is a decent beginner pet that you can get in floor 2. While active, melee attacks have a 10% chance to deal 225% more damage. Melee attacks dealt from above can inflict slowness, and you gain 150 defense. It's a decent pet that can give you some survivability in the form of defense, and a chance for some higher damage. First in D tier is the Drown pet. This pet is frankly not very good at all. You deal 10% more damage to sea creatures, and you get 10 sea treasure chance. When you're below 20% health, attacks that would have done over 10% of your max HP have a 15% chance to be nullified. This pet has 5 less sea creature chance than the glow squid, so you'd always want to use that instead. You'd probably prefer not using this pet at all and just waiting for a glow squid. And this pet is also a fishing pet, so it does not gain combat XP, making leveling it up not very fun at all. So you always want to never use this, just use the glow squid instead. Next is the zombie pet. This pet is the best starting out pet in my opinion, specifically for floor 1. You get this pet super easily, and its perks complement floor 1 perfectly. You deal 150% more bonus damage to undead enemies, you take 60% less damage from undead enemies, and you regen health 7.5% quicker. This pet balances damage and survivability really well for a beginner pet, but outside of floor 1, it's not the best. Then you have the slime pet. The slime is a tank pet, and it grants some decent survivability. You have a 75% chance to slow your enemies when you attack, you gain 225 max HP, and you have a 1.5% chance to absorb the damage of nearby allies, nullifying it. At Mythic, you gain defense for every 50 kills you get while it's active, for a total of 50 defense. The next pet is also a tank pet, the Armadillo. You regenerate 1% of your max HP every second, you gain 225 extra HP, just like the slime, and gain 5 defense for every 20 base health. This pet is not very good because of how late in the game you can get it, but it does provide some bulk, which keeps it out of F tier. Finishing up D tier is the creature pet. The creature is a good healer pet. It'll definitely hold you over until you can get some of the better healing pets. You regenerate health 30% more effectively, nearby players deal 30% more damage. The cool part about that is that you can stack it with 5 different creatures in the same party, for a total of 150% bonus damage. And, final perk, healing abilities are 50% more effective while the pet's active. A pretty decent healer pet, but you'll quickly find better ones. B tier is where the pets start to actually get pretty good. To begin, let's talk about the flying fish. This pet gives 30 fishing speed, the highest amount in the game. It decreases time it takes for a fish to appear by 0.25 seconds. And you also have a 15% chance to gain anywhere from 1 to 3 additional materials when fishing up an item. If you manage to get a mythical, you can activate a fishing frenzy to get 75% more fishing XP for 1 minute. If you have low sea creature chance, this pet is not great. But if you're a high level fisher that already has 100% sea creature chance, then this is easily S tier though. Keep in mind, the additional materials perk does not work on treasure. It only works on things like fish and pufferfish, things like that. The next is the wolf. The wolf is tied with the lost one for the most amount of bonus dungeon XP you can get from a pet. If you have the wolf pet equipped, you take 75% less damage from wolves. This can be useful if you're using it as a warrior pet in the Frosted Passage, but otherwise it's not very useful. You deal 30% more melee damage, and you get 60% more dungeon XP. A lot of people use this pet to level up significantly faster, but there's a better version later on the list. The panda is next. I love the panda pet. I mean, come on, it's a panda. You love pandas, right? Here are the stats. You regenerate health 15% more effectively, you gain 225 max health, and nearby players take 15% less damage. That can stack up with 2 pandas for a maximum of 30% damage reduction. The final ability is called Panda Sanctuary. It creates an aura around you that increases your defense by 100%, doubling it, and your attack power by 50%, and this lasts for 15 seconds. It's a good healer pet. It provides allies with damage reduction, and you can use this pet to buff yourself as well. A good balance between team support and self-sustainability. Then we have the axolotl. The axolotl has one purpose: fishing less. I personally do not enjoy fishing, so anything to speed up the process is always a good thing in my book. You gain 150 speed while in water. Nobody really cares. You get 18.8 fishing speed, pretty nice, but the main event is the 30% fishing XP buff. This is a good pet if you're trying to reach a specific fishing level, quickly to get a tag or a recipe, or just leveling up for the extra sea creature chance. The turtle pet is a really good tank pet. In fact, it's probably the best tank pet in the game. You get a free 150 defense, and as an ability you can go inside your shell and take 75% less damage on a 30-second cooldown. Healing items will also cost 30% less mana. At Mythic, you just get a flat 30% damage reduction buff. This pet provides the best defensive buffs in the game, making you nearly invincible, even in Floor 4. The only thing holding this pet back from A, or maybe even S tier, is because of how little the tank class is actually used. Ending off B tier is the Yeti. The Yeti is one of the better archer pets. It gives 30% more arrow damage, and you have a 7.5% chance to freeze your opponents. You gain 75 crit damage, and at Mythic, your attacks have a 3.75% chance to deal 450% more damage. This pet, in my opinion, is just a worse version of Scorpion. The mythical ability does not proc often enough to be useful. A tier is the tier where you will start to see pets used often by late game to end game players. They are not quite as powerful as the ones that sit in S tier, but they are still very good. Let's start with the lizard pet. The lizard is used for one thing, and one thing only: his luck. But he can be used as a healer pet. Support ability cooldowns are reduced by 15%, support abilities that increase stats are 12% more powerful, and while equipped, you gain an extra 7.5 luck. This pet is really easy to just swap to at the end of a boss to get free luck, and that's the only reason why it's this high. And if you care, the mythical ability creates a small healing circle around your feet, healing all players for 10% of their max HP every second for 5 seconds. The baby sand dragon is my personal favorite pet in the game. I have a mythical. His name is Gregory. Gregory is my everything. Moving on, with the warrior class buffs, the sand dragon has become a pretty good option for damage. I believe it's the second highest warrior damage pet in the game, just behind Snake. You deal 37.5% more melee damage, you take 75% less fire damage, and you gain attack power for every 100 desert mobs you've killed while it's active. The max for that is 10 attack power, which is an extra 20% damage boost. With each attack you have, you get 2% extra damage per 10% missing HP. So let's say you're down 10% HP, you deal 2% extra damage. This is not the best, because in Floor 4, especially Impossible, you're most likely not going to survive very many hits. So scaling damage based off of health remaining is not the best at all. Next is the glow squid. The glow squid is the best pet in the game for treasure fishing. It gives the highest amount of sea treasure chance out of any mob. Mobs that are fished up are inflicted with Poison 3 for 15 seconds. You gain 15 sea treasure chance, the highest in the game, and when fishing up a sea creature, stun it for 5 seconds, and during that time, all damage you deal to it is doubled. This is the pet you're going to be using if you're trying to fish for enchanted books like Tough Rod. You don't want to be using the Drown because it has 5% less sea creature chance. Sorry, treasure chance. So this is the pet that you want to be using if you're going to be treasure fishing at all. Alright, the next is Shark. The Shark pet used to be the best fishing pet in the entire game, before it was dethroned by the Behemoth's Tentacle. But the Shark is still a pretty solid pick, used by most of the people. You get an extra 30% sea creature chance, the second highest in the game. You also take 30% less damage from sea creatures, and you deal 15% more damage to them. With the mythical Shark, every 5 seconds, deal 5% of the caught sea creature's health as damage to them. The Panther pet is on par with the Spirit pet. Many people say it's worse, many say it's better, but I've placed Spirit higher for one very specific reason I'll touch on later. But the Panther pet has a 60% mana cost reduction on all abilities, gives you 75 speed, and a 26.25% magic damage buff. The Mythical gives you a 15% chance to negate enemy attacks entirely, taking no damage. Now is the Tarantula pet. The Tarantula pet used to be the best pet in the entire game, but it was recently nerfed, and the nerf hit hard. But first, let's get into the abilities. Your melee attacks deal 37.5% more damage, and you have a chance to apply Poison 5 to enemies upon hit. You also gain 50% more dungeon XP. Not as good as the Wolf or the Lost One, but still a nice bonus. With Mythic, you get an additional 2 swing range. This pet is a great option for warriors. You do extra melee damage, you have extra swing range, and you get more dungeon XP as a nice little bonus. But what made this pet so good before was the poison. This pet used to be required for floor 4. The poison used to apply to every single segment of the sandworm, melting the HP super fast. But since the worm is now immune to poison, the Tarantula sits at a comfortable spot in A tier. Ending off the tier is Scorpion. The Scorpion is the pet that I personally use for my archer setup, and it does the job well. It's fairly cheap compared to the other options, and grants some crazy damage. You get 37.5% range damage, you get 12.5 crit damage, 125 crit damage, and a 10% chance to triple your enemy's damage dealt, but only on a critical hit. So that is a 10% chance to just deal triple the damage you would have done to begin with. For the price, this pet is more than does its job, which is why it sits at the very top of A tier. Now on to our last tier of the video, S tier. This tier houses the best of the best in terms of pets. These pets are the highest form of damage or support obtainable within DungeonDodge. Let's start with the Spirit. I personally find the Spirit better than Panther for a very specific reason. It is dirt cheap. Since they are so common, you can buy a Mythical Spirit for around 150k and a Legendary for anywhere from 30 to 50k. It gives a 30% magic damage buff, 25% mana cost reduction, and you siphon 30 mana from slain mobs. At Mythic, you gain 10 bonus mana per mage class level, meaning the higher level mage you are, the stronger it gets. This pet is amazing whether you're a beginner, intermediate, advanced, or endgame mage. The Mummy is widely considered to be the best mage pet, or tied for the best with Snake. However, the Legendary Mummy is on par, maybe weaker than Spirit or Panther, but the Mythic is crazily strong. You gain 150 extra mana, 37.5% magic damage, you get 5 mana for every 50 kills you get while it's active, for a total of 500 extra mana. And finally, the strongest ability is at Mythic. When hitting an enemy, you have a 25% chance to inflict Wither 4. Inflicted enemies will take 30% more magic damage from any source. With this ability stacked with the extra mana and 37.5% more magic damage, this pet will shred HP like there's no tomorrow. Next in the S tier, I place the Fennec pet. The Fennec is the best healer pet in DungeonDodge. If you're serious about becoming a good healer, you should pick up one of these guys. You and your entire party get 25% extra damage from any source per Fennec in the group. Support abilities heal 25% more, and the best ability of all effects you apply to teammates and yourself are increased by 1 level. Say you granted allies speed 4, now it's speed 5. And this stacks with healer armor and healer class perks, allowing for your team to go super speed. At Mythical, while sneaking, all allies are healed for 5% of their max HP every second, but you lose 8% of your max HP. This ability is not very useful though. The Behemoth's Tentacle is just a strict upgrade to the Shark. It marks hit enemies, making them glow, and increases damage dealt to them by 15%. You deal 7.5% more damage per enemy within a 5-block radius, and you get 37.5% sea creature chance, which is 7.5% more than the Shark. And at Mythic, you increase the catch rate of deep sea creatures by 5%. A really good ability considering how rare these things can seem at times. To my knowledge, this is the rarest pet in the game. I've personally never seen anybody drop more than a common, and I don't think anybody has gotten a legendary or a mythic. Like I said, probably the rarest pet in the entire game. Next is the Lost One pet. This pet can be obtained in floor 3, and is amazing. It is an amazing all-rounder pet. It gives 30% more ranged and magic damage, 60% more dungeon XP, making it tied with the wolf for the highest amount of XP it gives, and gives you 75 defense. This pet blends offense with defense and slaps in an XP bonus as well. This is a really solid option even until late game. One of the players that helped me create this list personally used the Lost One for about 70% of their playtime. The best pet in DungeonDodge, however, the cream of the crop, is the Snake. Similarly to the Lost One, the Snake is a good all-rounder pet, but it goes hard on the offense. Any Snake pet before Legendary is terrible. They probably belong in B tier at most. You regenerate 1.5% of your max HP while invisible. You deal 30% more melee damage to an enemy only if there are no nearby enemies within a 5-block radius. You also do 15% more melee damage on top of that, with an additional 15% against strictly bosses. Finally, the Mythic Danger Noodle makes you invisible for 5 seconds after killing an enemy. While invisible, you deal a flat 60% more damage from any source. So just by having this pet out and killing something, you deal 60% more damage. I mentioned this pet is an all-rounder because it's technically the best or the second best mage pet, it is the best archer pet, and it is the best warrior pet. This guy does absurd amounts of damage, which gives him our number spot on this list. Thank you for taking time out of your day to listen to me ramble about pets in a video game. If you have any more questions, feel free to ask me in the comments below. I'll definitely be checking those out. That's all for today. I'll see you guys later.